Good morning. I'm so happy to see you. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me, but I know you're there. And I'm so happy, so glad you're here. Welcome. On behalf of Unity of Stockton, where I am a minister, I want to tell you just a little bit about what Unity of Stockton is all about. And I know that all of you watching are not Unity folks, and that's fine because Unity embraces all religions. I, in particular, embrace all faiths, all religions, all walks of life, all faith traditions, no matter who you are, no matter how you are living your life, and no matter how you have lived your life. We turn spiritual ideas into everyday language, showing you how you can actually use these ideas for a more enriching and rewarding life. No matter where you are on your own personal spiritual path, on your life journey, your spiritual journey, your life path, we welcome you. And we emphasize a positive attitude, a different way of wading through the challenges of this human life that may be somewhat different from what you've experienced before. So, hope you like it. Today's spiritual message is entitled Sweet Surrender. Sweet, sweet surrender. Oh, what comes to mind for me in this moment is just a peacefulness and a release and a relief deep inside my heart and soul when I think of sweet, sweet surrender. But sometimes that's not always the case when we think of surrender. Sometimes we feel a tightness. And spiritual teachings confuse us because we seem to get contradictory instructions about how to respond to these life circumstances, these life challenges. And it's like when to steer in the direction of what we want for our lives, which is what I talked about last week if you were here, and if you were not, that's what I talked about, versus when to surrender the navigation and control to the pilot. And you know what? It's not necessarily an either or proposition. There's a timing to it. So, as I said last week, a brief summary was that the first thing about trying to find out, setting the path for your life's intentions is trying to get clarity. Not trying, but getting clarity on what you really want for your life. And for me, I get excited about so many things that it's hard for me to hone it down to what really, really is the most important things in my life, the values, what I want my life to be, what I want to be. Clarity, getting clarity on that. And then once you figure that out and get clear on that, because clarity is power, and once you figure out what you really want for your life, what you really want your life to be, what you want to experience and feel, then you set that intention. Okay, this is what I figured it out. This is what I want, and I'm setting an intention. This is what I want for myself. This is what I aim to happen. And then you open yourself to be open to all of the people and things and situations surrounding you that would lead you to where you want to be or what you want to be or what you want to happen in your life. So you become aware of all that's there for you to grab hold of. Oh yeah, that would help. Oh yeah, that would help. And you become open and aware. And then it's not enough. You can say, some spiritual traditions say, just pray. But we can pray and meditate and go om all day long. And that's not necessarily going to cut it. That's really important things to do. Ultimate pinnacle of things to do. But we realize we're co-pilots with the divine source of our being. And we take action and we do our share. So action is required. And then once we've done everything that we think of that we need to do to get what we want, then that's when we surrender. And there's a way to go about surrendering too. Not latching on like, oh, I'm going to surrender now, not forcing it. It can't be forced. We just kind of let go. Ooh, no, just gently. So, clarity, setting the intention, being open and aware, taking action, and then surrender. Now, let's go into that in more detail. So, some people, when you say surrender, they say, what? Throw the towel in? Let the other person win? Oh, there's something about that. It's not easy for us, is it? I mean, sometimes I think we don't even know how or when. And sometimes we're too busy being caught up in our drama and the drama around us, the drama of others, to see that we might have some choice in the matter of what's going on. We might have some power in this. Self-empowerment. Sometimes we don't even know that we need to surrender, or what needs to be surrendered, or that we should surrender sometimes. We're not even aware. Yikes! Wow, a lot more to this than meets the eye, right? So again, surrender cannot be forced. Let go gently. It cannot be willed. I will this to happen. It can't be faked. You can't say, I surrender when you really don't, because it just doesn't work that way, folks. It just happens. And there you are. There you are, feeling that relief and that peace after having gone through all the steps. You get to a place where, it's time. So when we fake surrender and say we're surrendering and tell ourselves in our human ego head that we're surrendering, and we don't pull that together with our heart at the true depths of us where we're truly letting go, we're just saying it because we think that's what we ought to say or supposed to say, and it's not real. When we fake it, it's not going to do what we hope it will ultimately accomplish. It's not going to work. It's like forcing yourself to go to sleep. Go to sleep, go to sleep. You know, when you do that, of course, are you going to go to sleep? No. Eyes pop wide open. Some things just can't be forced. And when we try to force surrender, you know what we're doing? We're doing what they call spiritual bypass. You ever heard of that? Spiritual bypass. When we try to force surrender, we're doing a spiritual bypass. Now, what is that? That's using spiritual practices, like saying, oh, I'll pray, or oh, whatever flowery phrase we might throw out there and not really feel and not really mean, but we just throw it out there because we've heard it. It's a cliche, and we don't really feel it. We don't really mean it. We just know, oh, that's the thing to say. That's the cliche that everybody says. Everything's in divine order, but do we stop and think about what does that mean? Do I really feel that, or am I just throwing out there this flowery cliche? Using those spiritual practices and using those spiritual beliefs to avoid dealing with painful feelings and to avoid dealing with unresolved wounds. Spiritual bypass. We can't bypass those things, folks. We're meant to go right through the middle of them. It's all part of the game, the path, the journey toward evolving to a higher way of being for ourselves, in ourselves. You know, surrender is just not possible, though, until we consciously identify what it is we need to release. So there again, there's that clarity. We need to get clarity on what it is we need to surrender. Sometimes we don't even know what it is. More about that. The other thing is what it is. The other thing is, how do we do it? How do we do it consciously? I mean, sometimes we let go without thinking about it, but if we do it consciously with a consciously set intention, This is why I'm doing this, and this is how I'm going to do it. If we know how, a set of steps about how to surrender so that it works, and when, the timing, when is the right time, when we do it consciously with all of these things in mind, then we can start to use the variety of practices and techniques and tools, spiritual, secular and non-secular, secular, psychological, spiritual, all the tools that we could use. So let's explore further. So there's two approaches to surrender. One is the co-creative approach that I just talked about, where we create. We set our intention and we create. This is going to happen for my life, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is the tools I'm going to utilize, and we set the intention to create what we want our life to be. Okay, wow. It's and then the other method then would be a passive wisdom approach. So co-create, make it happen, and then a passive wisdom. So let's go look at each of these. The co-creative approach is when you make it happen. You develop an attitude. You take on an attitude. This is what I want. I know it now, and I'm going to make it happen. And it applies our creative power, which we have in our minds, to a field of infinite possibilities that can help us make it happen. And we open our hearts and our minds to all of those possibilities. And we declare and we claim how our life will unfold for us. There's a power in that intention. I set the intention. This is how it's going to be. And we bring a specific outcome into manifestation. We bring it into being for ourselves. Okay, I talked a lot about that one last week. That was the basis of my whole talk. And if you didn't see it, go back and watch it. And if you did see it, go back and watch it again. Now, this power, this method often works. And why? Science confirms that reality is not necessarily fixed. It's alterable. And it's shaped in part by our perception of it, how we see it, our life view through our past experiences. And I may view something this way because I've experienced this, and you may view it a different way because you've experienced this in your life. And we each think we're right. And so we alter our view of what perceived reality. I think this is reality, and you think this is reality. And we're both right. And this is exciting, this principle, and it's empowering, and it can be used for greater good in our lives, as I spoke about last week. But when we do that, and we get clarity on what we want, and we go for it, and we utilize the field of what's available to us to make it happen, and we do everything that we know that needs to be done, then is the time for the passive wisdom approach. And that's the time to surrender. And I'm reminded of Olivia Newton-John, who sings this song, Let Go and Let God. And she says, when you can't find your direction, when your heart won't guide you home, you let go and let God. Look that song up and listen to it. It's just so helpful when you want to get yourself into that space. When you want to take your hands off the wheel of our lives and trust an unseen power and unseen energy to guide and steer us for our highest and greatest good. Where we may think that higher energy or power or God may need to take us, what we think we want may not always come about in the way we think it ought to. I mean, if we think that shiny red car is going to bring us happiness, if happiness is really what we're seeking, it may or may not do that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting or having a shiny red car. But when we become so obsessed with it that we lose sight of the spiritual nature of things, that's when it becomes a problem. There's nothing wrong with wanting that or having it. It's the abuse of it. It's the focus and dwelling on that to the exclusion of our spiritual nature. So, we arrive at this point where we might be ready to surrender when we have a difficult attitude. Our attitude amidst the storm that's all around us, the storm that's going on right now. You know what I'm talking about. I don't need to put words on it. There's a storm raging out in the world. And for some of us, it's entered our heart and our soul, and it's wrestling. We're at war. Not only out there, but now we've identified with it such that we're at war in here. And it's not comfortable. It's hurtful. It's angry. It's just a mess inside our being. I'm not saying it's not right or wrong. I'm just saying sometimes amidst the storm, and it seems sometimes that storm is sure to break us. I can't handle this anymore. It's just too much. I just don't get it. How could all this be happening? Our survival instinct. I have to survive. Our spiritual bravado. I can be brave. I can be brave. And we rear up in a resolute stance. I'm going to rise above this. I'm going to oppose the ill winds of circumstance that seem against us. Get all bristly. Resistance. And sometimes that anger and that resistance can jumpstart us to take the action that we need to take. But when it's done in a certain way, well, you know. But true surrender is effortless. It's a non-resistance to what is. It doesn't necessarily have to be throwing in the towel and the other person wins, but sometimes it's surrendering to a situation. Surrendering to what is, all of it. And I'll tell you how I know this. When my daughter, Rachel, was in elementary school, maybe first grade, I think, and she was taking ballet lessons after school. And so I get in the car to go pick her up from ballet, and I have her little poodle puppy in the car. And it was in Roanoke, Virginia, and it had been snowing. And it was a sunshiny day, and the snow was melting. And there was a shady spot in the road where the trees covered the sun, and so there was what they call black ice on the road. Oh, that stuff is treacherous. And my car started to skid, and I even felt it starting to lift up off the ground. I slammed on the brakes. Whoa, that was not the thing to do. But, you know, when you're in a panic and things are happening so fast, and it raised up off the ground and went flying through the air. And I saw the other cars coming toward me as I flew across the road. And I was in a panic mode, and at some point, I thought, you're dying. And I went, okay. Okay. And I landed in a ravine across the road. I flew over the top of the cars that were coming toward me, not into them, but over the top of them, into a ravine, and my car flipped over upside down. And I crawled out that window with that puppy unharmed, except emotionally, of course, physically unharmed. I surrendered. And that seems to be when things happen for a better good. After that, a number of things, it was a domino effect. I really made some big changes in my life after that. Went a different direction. So true surrender, effortless non-resistance to what is, all of it. I think I've been different ever since that day. It's it's beyond seeing a world distinctly through my worldview, but I began to have an expanded view where the paradoxes in the world, the good, bad, the yin yang, the right, wrong, the ugly, the pretty, the seeming paradoxes, polarities, this, that, black, white, I started to dance with them. And I started to give way. I started to see them in a different way and see that they were flip sides of the same coin. They were all part of the deal. How could you see beauty if you hadn't experienced ugly? How could you see light if you hadn't experienced dark? How could you appreciate those things if you hadn't experienced the other? I danced with them. I saw them in a different way. I gave way to a greater, higher truth about this earthly realm and the things that go on here. I experienced and still experience, not all the time, every moment. I don't think we're made to be able to withstand that, but I began to experience what is called an at-one-ment, at one with the divine, at one with every human being, at one with everything. Wow, I'm telling you, that's total relief. And also there's a sense of a deep connection with all that is abiding in spiritual power. Not a forceful egoic puffiness that has to predict and control and defend against everything. Instead, a trust in all is in divine order. Every snowflake has its place. A trust in divine guidance, that there is a wisdom and a guidance that is right here, always guiding us. If we just get quiet, become aware, and listen, and hear. There's a leaning into what is arising with a deep sense of courage. We prepare. We take action. We prepare to surrender. We recognize that there is something to be surrendered. There's some element of over-identification with a thought that we have. Ooh, I'm not good enough, or ooh, they slighted me, or ooh, they should have done this, or I should have done that. Some over-identifying with those kinds of thoughts. Some over-identifying with certain emotions of, oh, I feel crappy. I feel so devastated. I feel so pissed off. Oh, I'm a minister. Did I say that? Yes, I did. Over-identification with a thought or an emotion, over-identifying with it. Or maybe an over-identification with a certain behavioral pattern. I do these behaviors over and over. It's a habit that I really want to break. Or maybe over-identification with a story that we're telling about ourselves. About that person didn't return my phone call. Oh, it must mean they don't like me, or I pissed them off, or I made them mad, and maybe it doesn't mean any of that at all. Maybe it's not about us. Over-identification with a story about our life, or something that happened, or that we perceived happened, or whatever. Over-identifying with it. Not that we're in denial about stuff that happens to us. It's just overly identifying with it. Or maybe even making up a story that's not real, not realistic, because we don't bother to check it out. There's a sense in those cases that it has you. You don't have it. We're talking about our power of mastery and dominion over our lives. We have it. It doesn't have us. Those thoughts and emotions and stories and behaviors that get us into trouble, we have control over them. They don't have us. So here's the key. You ready for the key? There's a degree, and it's all about the degree on a continuum of readiness in your mind, in your body, in your heart, that determines how quickly the release happens, the letting go happens, and how easily and gently and flowingly it happens. When we fixate on a thought and we're in emotional turmoil, maybe because of that thought, we block what inevitably needs to happen for the health and wealth of our whole being, our well-being, our wholeness, and our beingness. We block that. And the sooner that we stop over-identifying with the hamster wheel of thoughts, and emotions, the sooner we are able to get what we really want, whatever that is for you. You fill in that. The sooner I stop identifying with the hamster wheel of thoughts and emotions, the sooner I ... You fill that in. Don't take too long to analyze it. Let it be in your heart. Let what comes naturally to come. The sooner I. There's something that helps with surrendering, and it's called centering prayer. And this is one of the techniques called centering prayer, and it's actually a meditative practice. It's a premise that's based totally on letting go. The premise of it is letting go. And Thomas Keating came up with this based on an older form of contemplative prayer. And if you don't know about Thomas Keating, he's a priest and a monk, and from the Catholic origin. And I want to say, and I've said this before, that in all religions there is a continuum. There is a metaphysical, mystical end, and a more traditional end. And there's a continuum in all religions, and the Catholic religion also has its mystical end. And that's where Thomas Keating comes in. And he came up with this centering prayer that's based on letting go. And that literally is the practice of centering prayer. It's where you willingly let go of anything that enters your field of consciousness while you're during the prayer. Any thoughts and emotions that try to enter during prayer. So you might say that's impossible. Every time I try to pray or meditate, all these thoughts come. We don't forcefully try to get rid of them. And there's a way to do that. So Keating talks about steps to do this. Of course, he says, first you have to sit comfortably. And that's easy, he says, for anybody to do, right? Sit comfortably. Eyes closed, of course. Relax. Quiet yourself. And be in love and faith to God. That's an important step. Be in love and faith as you enter this centering prayer. And the second step is choosing a sacred word. This is key. Choose a sacred word that best supports your sincere intention. I often, when I do this, I love this way of praying. It's a meditative practice, and I very often use the words divine love and wisdom. And those are my sacred words very often. That's my go-to. But I've sometimes used ones that are more in alignment with what I'm praying about. So be in presence with the divine. Being in presence with the divine. Open to divine action within you. Divine action within you. Open to that. With that sacred word. Whatever that sacred word might be. Or a phrase, or several words. Let that word then, on step 3, let that word be gently present. Your symbol your sincere intention to be in the presence with a capital P, and open to the divine within you. And then step 4, any feelings and perceptions or images, return to your word. Just gently return yourself to your word. Don't beat yourself over the head. Just say, oh, look at that. That thought came in, that emotion came in. I'm going to gently return to my sacred word, because your word is your anchor. It anchors you in the divine presence. It works. Look it up, Centering Prayer, Thomas Keating, Keating. And there's another thing about surrender. When it comes to surrender, your environment. You need to be in an environment that promotes authentic, real, genuine surrender in the various aspects of your lives, your loved ones, your home life, your work, your outside interests, all of those. And if there's only one of those that does not support your surrender, then it's manageable. But if more than one does not support your surrender, then surrender is difficult. You know what I mean by this. When you're in any one of those situations with a loved one, in your home, in your work, in your interests, that's not where you don't feel safe emotionally or physically, when you don't feel that you matter, it's difficult to surrender. So if that's the case for you, then maybe it's time for you to think about your environments and how could you get it to a point where it would be more manageable. So the same goes for toxic or combative environments where there's always combat going on around you, within you, in your home or at work or whatever. Toxic, consistently. Occasional combat or toxicity is to be expected, but consistent, where you can never get away from it, that's the kind that's so hard on your health. So are you aware of where you're sharing your time and with whom you're sharing your time, and how ultimately you want your life to look like, how you want your life to be? And are there some changes or choices that you need to start making to cultivate the environments that allow you to be what you want to be, that allow you to get to a place of surrender, that allow you to get to that point in your becoming all that you can be? Oh, I love that Army slogan, the bumper sticker, be all you can be. I'd like to have that on my bumper, except I don't like stickers on my bumper, but still like to have it. And then the final step is the ultimate let go and let God. You've done what you need to do. You've done what you can. And then you go into prayer or some way to relax. And those things promote your general sense of readiness for whatever you are to be. Okay, people say, oh, if I give up power, if I surrender, they'll have won. They'll have got an advantage over me. I'll be giving up. I'll be giving in. Turn the other cheek. No, I can't do that. Okay, that's not exactly what that means. But that's another talk. I'll talk about that more. But it flies in the face of our ego, our human ego, and it's our instinct to control everything and everyone. Yeah, in essence, surrender does mean giving up. Yes, that's true in a very simple way. That's true. If we go to war with another person, not out in war, but in war with another person with combative language or in our mind, oh, that person, or war within ourselves, I shouldn't have done that. If we go to that kind of warring within ourselves, that combat within us, that internal conflict or that conflict with another, and if one side surrenders, the victor does have control. The defeated side now totally is reliant on the benevolent side of the victor. That's a vulnerable position to be in, folks. Talk about Brené Brown's work on vulnerability. Vulnerability is a necessary part of things. And it's hard to let ourselves be vulnerable. But this is where faith enters the picture. Faith that there is a higher power leading us to our highest good. Even through it all. Even through the good, bad, the ugly, the thick and thin. Faith that there is a higher power guiding us, with us always. I'm reminded of a song by Karen Drucker that some of you may recognize, and she's saying it's called Morning Prayer. I will surrender to my highest good. It's when we know that a higher power is leading us to our highest good. And in her song, she says, I will surrender to my highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way. Look that song up. I will surrender. It's Morning Prayer. I will surrender to my highest good by Karen Drucker. I will release any fear that blocks my way. So if we can, if we're in that older way of life, going back now, I'm going back and forth, but I need to take us back a minute. Sorry. And we're in that combative mode within us, and we can maintain this view of life, until it no longer fits the reality that we're facing, until it's inadequate to explain or work out life's dilemmas. This is not working. This combative feeling is not working. It's not working in this situation. The day comes for all of us when we suffer a great fall. Okay, am I the only one who suffered a great fall or two or three in my life? Or little ones, big ones? The day comes for all of us when we suffer a great fall. When our life breaks in such a way that our best thinking fails us. This way of thinking is no longer working in this situation. And in those moments, we encounter a much vaster reality than our limited human senses and intellect can comprehend. When the challenge is so beyond our human capacity to understand, let alone resolve, we are literally or sometimes figuratively driven to our knees. You know these times. You've had them. And this is the moment when what we are facing and what life is asking of us takes us to the edge of our human resourcefulness. This is a pivotal moment in our spiritual progress. And the way we respond yields to either breakthrough, or break down. Which would you rather? If we cling rigidly to rational attempts to control the situation and will our way out of it, will probably break under the sheer weight of an impossible situation. But if we recognize the limits to our mind, our human thinking, our ego, and surrender our hearts to a higher power, we break through to a universal presence with a capital P, that can support us in moving through any challenge. It's greater than any challenge. It's greater than anything we might experience on this earth. I'm reminded of another song by Sheila Noll, Noll. You can relax now. You can relax now. Breathe deeply now. I am with you. That's one of my go-to songs too. Surrender is not defeat and this final straw that you have lost something. It's about expanding into a greater, freer sense of self. Self with a capital S. The phrase, "Nothing can disturb the calm peace of my soul," becomes a living reality. Not because you're never disturbed again, but because you don't identify or over-identify with the disturbedness as you. You are not the disturbedness. I love that. Jesus was referring to this paradox between go for it and surrender in Matthew 16, verse 25, when he said, For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Okay, what does that mean? As we keep struggling, warring, using the ego to buffet up some false sense of reality, we stay at the mercy of our pain and suffering. For whoever desires to save his life, to keep from surrendering, will lose it. There's another reality, and it begins by preparing to surrender because you know it's time. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Surrender your earthly ego to a higher power. So to begin with in this practice, maybe you can pick something small that doesn't bring about so much fear. And start a practice of surrendering. Let your practice of letting go leak into the rest of your life. If you can summon even a little willingness to let go, to put yourself at risk, being vulnerable of not knowing exactly what's around the corner, and being okay with that, that's a sign of mental health. I don't know exactly what's right around the corner for me, and I'm okay with that. You make way for a greater knowing to reach your heart. A greater knowing. This is the narrow way of spiritual surrender, where the headstrong way is abandoned in favor of the heart's guidance. A surrender unlike any other, in which you do not give up on life, but you give way to the greater life, greater with a capital G, life with a capital L, that surrender reveals and opens up for you. When you understand that your life depends on a synergistic collaboration between the infinite mind of God and our own human conscious awareness. It's a collaboration. Then we can be as ready to take the wheel as to release it. Whatever's needed in that moment, when the time is right. We can intend for our good and move confidently in the direction of our preferred life, all the while holding a deep, pervasive knowing that Spirit is with us, guiding us. Wisdom, divine wisdom and guidance every step of the way. As close as our heartbeat, as close as our hand, as close as our next thought. Isn't that nice to know? To know. All right. Spiritual teachings sometimes confuse us. We seem to get contradictory instructions on how we respond to life situations, of knowing when to steer the direction to we're going for our preferences versus when we surrender the navigation and control to the pilot. It's not necessarily an either-or proposition. We be clear on what we want. We set that intention. We open ourselves, become aware of all that's surrounding us to help us get there. We prepare, we take action. And after we've done everything that we can think of, then we surrender. Joseph Campbell speaks of finding strength and surrender. Finding strength and surrender. And here's what he says. We must be willing to let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the life that is waiting for us. I wish you all the best, the very best. I send you my blessings, my love. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Now I need to move for a moment to let you know that next Sunday my spiritual message will be about sacrifice. Any significant advance will require a significant sacrifice. So my message will be sacrifice and move forward. And this is not the same as surrender. We tighten our belts in order to move forward. We sacrifice. We give up now and we wait in order to move forward. And that's what next Sunday will be about. Also want to announce, always we have a Unity Cafe on Zoom at 11:30 to 12:30 every Sunday where we just get on there and connect. And today it would be really cool to talk about Thomas Keating's centering prayer maybe, or whatever. And times in our lives when we've surrendered and when then we got the good come to us, or whatever. So if you don't have the Zoom link and you'd like to join us, let me know. I'll send it to you. It is available on Facebook, on our website. And the website is www.unityofstockton.org. I want you to know that I thank you for your gifts, monetary and otherwise. I thank you for your sacred service, all the ways that you give, a helping hand, making a phone call, reaching out to someone, just holding someone in your heart in prayer, just praying. I want you to know that the product that Unity of Stockton gives is transformed lives. It's a cause that's greater than we are. You can send monetary donations through snail mail. You can donate through PayPal on our website, the donate button, or you can Venmo Sheila Johnson-23, and I'll be sure and get it to Unity. I have it set to go to Unity's bank account. Thank you for your gifts, monetary and otherwise. Namaste, meaning the divine in me sees the divine in you. Blessings and love.